Hey everyone, welcome back to YouthRUs. I'm your host Raj, and this is the platform where we discuss all things youth. Today, we discuss global environmental issues and how we can look at these problems through a different lens than we normally do, not socially or scientifically, but economically. And to better help us understand the climate economy, today's guest is Dr. Gernot Wagner. Dr. Wagner is a leading climate economist, author, and educator whose work explores how economics, technology, and public policy can address one of humanity's greatest challenges, climate change. He's a faculty member at Columbia Business School, where he directs the Climate Knowledge Initiative, and the author of 6 books, including the acclaimed Climate Shock and Geoengineering, The Gamble. Dr. Wagner has held leadership roles at Harvard, NYU, and the Environmental Defense Fund, serves on the board of Carbon Plan, and contributes regularly to the New York Times, Financial Times, and Project Syndicate. His work has earned widespread recognition, including selection as a young global leader by the World Economic Forum, and he's advised governments and organizations around the world on climate policy and sustainable economic solutions. So let's jump right into the interview, and I hope you all enjoy. Hey everyone, welcome back to YouthRUs. I'm your host Raj, and today I'm here with Dr. Wagner. Dr. Wagner, would you like to briefly introduce yourself?
Hi there. Good to be here. Turns out it's Gernot, Juggernaut without the jug, my first name. But yeah, good to be here. Hi, Raj.
Hi. So just to, I guess, get into the introduction a bit, you originally grew up in Austria, right?
Austria, the one, yeah. No kangaroos, yes.
No. So before building your career in the United States, what experiences, I guess, kind of led you to start working in, climate as a broader topic?
Okay, so it might sound crazy now, but I basically called myself a climate economist in like 1996 as a 16-year-old, literally.
Wow.
Yeah, I never grew up, right? I've been doing the same thing ever since. So, and honestly, part of this is, look, climate, yes, was an issue back then, or should have been much more of an issue back then, which now, yes, does date me, of course, right? Ancient history, 30, not 60, sorry, 30 years ago. Yeah, I guess it is true. Back then, sort of climate economics was a little bit of an oxymoron. Right? When you said that, it was sort of like, wait, economists do interest rates and exchange rates and worry about GDP or whatever. And, climate enviro people worry about, birds and bees, right? So how? Why? And I think by now, nobody would say that, right? Like nobody would say, oh, wait a second, that's an oxymoron, right? Like everyone, I hope, or most of us understand that, to put it in a nerdy way, misguided market forces, right? Stuff pointing in the wrong direction is the problem. And the solution is also climate economics. It's basically guiding those market forces in the right direction, which, takes policy and technology and so on and so forth. But yeah, misguided economics, right, is the problem. Getting things right is the solution. I mean, duh, of course. And yeah, that's climate econ 101, if you will.
Okay. So I guess you're kind of living your dream job then, in a sense.
Yeah, I mean, I've only had one job in my life, right? So I've only ever done one thing. I mean, to be clear, right? I got my PhD. I went sort of straight through undergrad. You do well in certain classes as a sophomore, junior, and you're sort of being told that that's the obvious path for you. So yeah. But I left academia right after my PhD, more or less. So I wrote for the Financial Times editorial board on a few months fellowship. I was a consultant for BCG, Boston Consulting Group, for 10 months, just not long enough not to have to pay back the sign-on bonus, basically. And then I spent almost a decade, 8.5 years or so, at EDF, Environmental Defense Fund. But yeah, right. So 3 very different lines of work, if you will. Journalism, consulting, NGO. But I was a climate economist at all 3 places.
Right.
The substance didn't change. The day-to-day specifics, sure, right? So at the FT, I remember like the name of the game was, so you wrote 485 words a day in British spelling. anonymously because it was the anonymous newspaper opinion. But with some exceptions, of course. But for the most part, I focused on climate, energy, economics.
Mhm.
And my better editorials back then were very much in the climate economics realm. And yeah, at BCG, I was a climate economist specialist, if you will. That's all I did while there. And yeah, at EDF, my job title literally was climate economist.
Wow. So, I mean, then your career, you've touched on climate economics in a variety of ways, I guess, as you just mentioned. Journalism, consulting, and even like studying it for the most part of your academia. Um, and you said that you were first interested in it, or you declared it, I guess, as an interest when you were 16.
Slightly
Um,
precocious, but yes, yeah.
yeah. So when would you say you started being interested in climate economics, or even just in fixing climate change in general? Was it early on in your life, like in high school, middle school, or do you think you picked it up later after
Yeah,
studying it
I
for a
mean,
bit?
okay, so everyone is an environmentalist as a 12-year-old,
Hmm.
right? I hope at least that's the case, right? Um, and yeah, I joked before I just never grew up, right? But no, it's basically right. Like once you find your passion, and maybe that's really it, right? So,
Hmm.
unsolicited career advice: find your passion, stick with it, and yeah. So I guess here's one analogy, right? Sort of hammer versus nail. Right? So, nail is the topic, hammer is the tool, right? And, some people basically focus on the tool. And by the way, your typical academic focuses on the tool, right? They invent a hammer and then they go around looking for nails to figure out what to do with this fancy new thing that they had invented. Um, I did the exact opposite. I always focused on the nail, climate. And yeah, and then you go around looking for the right tools to figure out how to identify, solve that particular problem in some sense with whatever tools you can take from
Hmm.
wherever you might take them. And economics is one important such tool. It's not the only one, of course not. And it's also broad enough to basically encompass many, many different hammers, many, many different tools. But
Hmm.
yeah, again, right? So nail person here, right? If you will, somebody who's focused on that topic, trying to figure out how to be efficient, how to be effective, useful in trying to solve this massive, massive problem, climate change, with a whole variety of different tools along the way.
Okay. So I guess switching gears a bit to this whole idea of climate economics, would you say, or my understanding of climate economics is that kind of as you just helped me understand, um, is a process of choosing the best possible decision that will both benefit a community, I guess, environmentally, but also have the least costs. Is that?
That's part of it, yes.
Hmm.
Right. And okay, so I mean, honestly, it depends on who you ask, but sort of if you go with the broadest possible definition of what economics is, it's basically making choices subject to some constraints.
Okay.
Right? Sort of, you can't always get what you have. There are trade offs in life, basically.
Right.
Now, okay, so obviously economics then is much more than just that. But to a first approximation, yeah, that's really, right, that's really what's going on. Yeah, like maximizing, your lot in life, maximizing society's overall welfare, well being subject to there being some trade-offs, right? So you can't have it all. Basically, one can't have it all. There's only 24 hours in the day. There's only so much money in your bank account, and so on and so forth, right?
Right.
And yeah, that's the principle at work here. And the big, big question now basically is, cool. how do you tackle a problem as all-encompassing as climate change, right? As like the world's most global, most long-term, most uncertain, most irreversible problem out there, literally, at least in the combination of these four. And how do you then tackle that based on, there are trade-offs, right? People care about other things other than the long-term health of the planet for very, very obvious reasons. While at the same time, now the more specific we get, the more obvious it becomes that sometimes there are solutions, um, techno fixes, if you will, that provide those win-win-win situations where we would all be better off if certain
Mhm.
things could happen, were to happen. And the name of the game is to push for those solutions. Figure out how to cut the gas line and install the heat pump and the induction stove and the solar panels and the batteries and so on and so forth that make eminent economic sense on the one hand, and yes, also help address climate change.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. Um, Now, I want to kind of ask a bit about this idea that you've argued about how climate change is fundamentally a market failure. I'm not too familiar with economics, so I was just wondering if you could explain for me and some of our listeners what that means, I guess, in simple terms.
I mean, here's a very simple example. So, when one boards a flight, when you board a flight, right? So, you have the benefit of getting from A to B. Presumably, you're going there because, there's something on the other side that is worthwhile traveling to.
Hmm.
Okay, so you get the benefit. Who pays the cost? Well, you pay for the ticket, right? Sure, of the ticket of the flight, but there are CO2 emissions associated with that flight. Um, Flying from the East Coast to the West Coast in the U.S. or across the Atlantic is 1 ton of CO2. Literally, it's a metric ton of CO2 emissions round trip to get from New York JFK, let's say, to San Francisco, right?
Hmm.
Approximately. Okay. That ton of CO2 emission, that's a lot. That is a lot of CO2. And by the way, that's just you. That's not the whole plane. That's just you, you know, economy class, middle seat. Okay, the
Hmm.
middle seat doesn't matter, but the economy class that matters in this case. That's a lot of CO2 emissions. Who pays for the cost of that? Right? CO2 emissions are associated with climate change. There are real damages. People die because of that. So who pays for that cost? Well, all of us do. All 8 billion pay for the external cost, externality, technical term, the cost associated with the CO2 that not the whole plane, your flight, your ticket will have cost, right? So you have the benefit. And by the way, I'm not accusing you personally now, but yeah,
Yeah.
right? Like all of us, right? I bought
Yeah.
flights, right? So when I go from A to B, I have the benefit of going. Society pays for the cost.
Right.
That's the problem in a nutshell, right? And um, that happens over and over again, right? As long as we keep burning fossil fuels, as long as there are CO2 emissions associated with energy production, and energy extraction, um, then you experience this disconnect between personal benefits and social societal costs. And
Mm.
the name of the game is to make sure that polluters pay is the short version. Um, Basically, right, there's nothing wrong with flying. Mobility is good. As you can tell from my accent, right? So I'm not from New York originally, right? To see my parents, I need to board a flight. Um, but it shouldn't be all 8 billion of us paying for the privilege of me being able to see my parents. Right? That's just insane, right? Like,
Right.
why would everybody else pay for my trash? Shouldn't I pay for my own trash? That's really the principle at work here. And the name of the game is to make sure that when I bought that flight, I pay for those costs. And of course, so does everybody else.
Okay. So is this where that idea of carbon pricing that you've advocated for come in?
Bingo. Right? So, okay, so, it's not a rocket surgery, right? This is not a very difficult concept, right? It's
Yeah.
basically you pay for your own trash, right?
Yeah.
So if there are CO2 emissions involved with your activity, flying as an extreme example, if you will, but you and I do that, right? So might be a billion people on the planet who have never boarded a flight, and that is a problem too, right? Sort of lack of mobility is bad too. Um, but those of us who do board flights, yeah, better pay for those emissions.
Right.
Um, and one simple, in some sense, simplistic perhaps way to think about this, but yeah, a relatively simple way to do that is to say, okay, there are CO2 emissions. They cost money. There are these external costs. Let's make those who emit the CO2 pay for the emissions. And the simplest possible way to think about doing that is a carbon price, is a carbon tax, is an emissions trading system like the Europeans have or that exists in California right now and so on. Plenty of places in the world that are pushing forward with those policies, um, where the principle at work is that the polluter pays for that pollution.
Okay. So I was actually curious about this because I was reading up a bit on it, on carbon pricing, and I saw there's a lot of consensus, first of all, among economists, such as yourself, that carbon pricing is economically the best possible decision or the most appropriate decision, I guess. But I also read that it's been politically difficult to implement whatever that means.
Yes,
I was
and
wondering
yes.
if you had any, if you had
Uh,
any, I guess, input on that.
so, well, it is a very explicit, very open, transparent way, if you will, to make polluters pay,
Yeah.
right? So, guess what? Polluters are going to be up in arms against that. And polluters are going to say, hold on a second. No, 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 right? Like, not us, right? It's not our fault. Or, oh, that would cost especially the poor. Um, or, oh, that is not going to work because jobs,
Hmm.
and other, trade offs. And yeah, basically, at the end of the day, those who are going to bear most of the costs, fossil fuel companies. Let's name it what it is, right? So it's basically, okay, the Saudi Aramcos, the Exxons of the world,
The big polluters.
um, the big, right, the big oil and gas majors, or coal companies, but the coal companies are disappearing all by themselves, basically, as we speak, for the most part. Um, but yeah, oil and gas, are wildly profitable. Why? Because the rest of us pay for the pollution.
Hmm.
Right? Because basically, again, Aramco, Exxon, and so on are not paying for the external costs of their activities. The profits that they see, the billions of dollars in quarterly profits, happen on the backs of the rest of us. Right? And as long as policy does not compel those polluters, the polluters, all of us, to pay for our own pollution, yeah, you know, pumping oil, extracting gas, and burning it is wildly profitable because you get the personal benefit while you personally don't pay for the cost of the pollution. And yeah, again, the simple fix, and in many ways, I would say too simplistic a fix at the end of the day. But yes, one Econ 101, right? Economics 101, first class, first semester of economics undergrad, and so on, would be to say, wait, there's a simple solution here. Um, let's internalize the externality. Let's make polluters pay. Let's price carbon.
Right. So, okay. So I guess carbon pricing isn't just for individual people then. It should just be for any action that produces emissions.
Yes, and
Okay.
maybe, especially for the big polluters.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, okay, let's just sort of talk about how to actually do this practically. Well, okay, literally, right? You can walk up to 8 billion people around the world, ask them how much they emit, and then, ask them to pay for
Hmm.
the pollution. Okay, it might be simpler to walk up to, the half dozen or so major oil companies here and basically ask them to do that upstream, quotation marks, the technical term, right? So instead of every single customer individually, it's the refineries who pay, who then pass down the costs to the rest of us. But now we're getting into the weeds of how to actually implement a carbon tax like this. And by the way, now we're also getting into why it may not always be possible to do that. Because guess what? It's not as simple as knocking on the door of those half dozen, 2 dozen major companies, telling them, "Hey, pay up,"
Hmm.
right? They will refuse to do so. They will lobby. They will make sure that politicians get elected to are against that kind of policy for all the obvious reasons.
Okay, so it is. I can kind of see what everyone meant by saying it's so politically difficult now.
Yeah,
um,
exactly, right? So, and
yeah.
I mean, global carbon policy, right, might be the extreme example of all of this, but look around, right? Like this happens everywhere, right?
Hmm.
There are vested interests, there are corporate interests, there are companies who benefit from the status quo, and they will lobby very, very hard to keep things just so.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, while while the rest of us pays for the damage caused by those companies, um, yeah, we'll keep going the way we've been doing this for decades, centuries. Um, Vested interests, right, have a lot more power by
Yeah.
definition than each of us individually.
Okay. Dang. Um, well, if you had to think about technologies then instead of policies themselves, do you think there are any emerging technologies that have the potential, like if that are good? Okay, let me reframe this. um, do you see any emerging technologies that you believe would be economically wise to invest in, or would be good alternatives to current like status quo technologies?
Yes, yes, yes. And the short version is those technologies are already better. Like, I
Hmm.
don't want to call them alternatives because, right, solar PV, solar
Right.
panels are the cheapest source of electricity in history. Full stop. And here's the big difference. So, oil, coal, gas, right, the fossil fuels, they are commodities. They will always fluctuate. They have been fluctuating for decades, for centuries. In the case of coal, it's been around for a couple hundred years by now. Coal derived electricity, and electricity produced from burning coal, has cost approximately the same, inflation adjusted, for 200 years. Okay, solar PV, you know, 40 years ago, when Jimmy Carter, almost 45 years ago, when Jimmy Carter put solar panels on the White House roof, and then Ronald Reagan came along 5 years later and took them down.
Yeah.
Um, Solar PV was 100 times more expensive as it is today. 10, 12 years ago, it was 10 times more expensive than it is today. Okay, by now, solar panels are so cheap. Uh, Germans are installing them as garden fences, right? Not because
Wow.
putting them in vertically is the most efficient way of installing a solar panel, right? Like, no, you want to track the sun, but it's so cheap. You might as well. It's almost as cheap as wood, and it keeps the dog in and it keeps the car charged. Might as well,
Hmm.
right? And it's the sort of thing where, well, by the way, those are technologies, right? Solar panels, batteries, induction stoves, heat pumps are technologies. By definition, technologies can only get better and cheaper over time. Right? So, look at your phone, right? So you wouldn't buy the new version if it weren't either cheaper or better. Okay, for some reason these things never get cheaper. They only get better, right?
Yeah.
Supposedly. But yeah, right? Like, we get suckered into buying the new version, basically, because it's even better. Because the camera is even better and so on. Right? Okay, cool. Well, why is that the case? Because they're technologies. They can only get better or cheaper. Um, Solar panels, same thing. Um, Very different from commodities like oil, coal, gas, that, yes, will fluctuate, and often because of some geopolitical event halfway around the world, right, that decides oil prices for the rest of us. Um, because yes, there's a global market. Yes, whatever happens in the Middle East, right, matters a lot to oil
Hmm.
prices here at the pump. Um, and that is very, very different from technologies like solar PV. That, right, again, if the panel didn't get cheaper or better, well, you would just install the old version. You would just use the old version as opposed to buying the latest, better version
Right.
produced later.
Okay. So renewable technologies are definitely the way to go.
Yes.
Um, I want to keep track. I don't want to take too much of your time, so I think let's just get into a quick rapid fire, I guess.
Cool.
Like short answer. Um, so first of all, what is one climate myth, I guess, something that's a huge misconception today that you would want to erase forever?
Well, let's stick with economics here, that it's costly to do something about it. It's
Yeah.
not, right? The
Okay.
solution often is cheaper, better than the alternative fossil, traditional way of doing it. And yeah, that's a little known fact. And by the way, it'll only get more true the longer we wait, right? The solar PV isn't going to get more expensive. It'll get cheaper.
Right. What is one habit that you've adopted, that you think can, like little by little, reduce your own environmental impact?
Well, in my case, it's proselytizing about climate economics. But so look, actually, here's one. I don't have a driver's license. Never had one. Literally. Right, which as an 18-year-old in 1998, I can tell you was, wait, what? Why? How? Why wouldn't
Mhm.
you? Right? This is silly. Um, and okay, I live in New York City. Um, Turns out it's something like 90% of Manhattanites don't drive. 60% of us or so don't bother renewing our driver's license. Like those of
Mhm.
us who know how to drive. And again, I don't know how to drive, right? Never done it. Um, which, okay, might limit me somewhat. Okay. In my daily life, I certainly don't feel any limitations at all whatsoever.
Right.
Because, yeah, if you live in New York City and you try to get around by car, yeah, the joke's on you, right? So, why, why? And yeah, it turns out, right? So, if you bike everywhere on a daily basis, walk, take trains, and so on, you lead a more efficient, better, healthier life, right? That's
Right.
not a bad thing either.
Drive less, walk more. That's
There
the
we go.
motto. Yeah. Last rapid fire. If you weren't a climate economist, or if you weren't working in climate at all, what career do you think you would have pursued?
Never done anything else, so I wouldn't know what that's like.
Okay, fair enough. And before we wrap up, our one signature question is there anything that I haven't asked you about that you would really like to leave our listeners with?
Um,
Or, well, I'll let you
you
think for
good?
a second.
Go for
Okay.
it. You're safe
Um,
just now. Go for it.
so YouthRUs, we're focused on the idea that young people can make a difference, and obviously,
Yes.
such as yourself, it's evidence that young people do have these passions to make a difference.
Oh, you
Um,
consider me young right now? That's good.
yeah, well, of course, and also
Keep going.
even even back when you were in school, in grade school, I mean, you seem to have a passion for climate change. You stuck with that throughout your life, which is
Yes.
very admirable, first of all. But what is one action that every listener, most of our listeners are high schoolers. What is one action that our listeners could take this week to reduce their own climate impact?
I mean, to be clear, I think the biggest thing you can do is find your passion, find what you're good at. Right.
Hmm.
This is, by the way, another one of these econ principles. Sort of comparative advantage is a thing.
Yeah.
Right. You are an excellent writer. Okay, become an even better writer, and then yes, use that to do something about what you're passionate about. I hope that's climate change. Right. So we need everyone, anything, any tool available to figure out how to quote unquote solve this problem. So yeah, find your passion, run with it, and try to use whatever tools, whatever background, whatever capabilities, whatever is given to you, to the best of your abilities to make a difference, a positive difference in the world.
Great. That's a great note to leave off on, Dr. Wagner. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to our listeners who have been tuned in for the past, what is it, 30 minutes. And yeah, we'll see you all next time. Bye bye.
Thanks so much. That was fun. Bye,
Yeah.
Raj.
Bye bye.